The Super Tourers, which these days operates as a historic championship, have been to Oulton Park before at the Gold Cup last year, and it's great to have them this once on the support bill. They qualified this morning on a road that was wet, dried, got wetter, dried a bit and got wetter again. John Cleland was the fastest in one of his original Vectras, but he had a suspension problem. He's gone away and got some parts, and the good news is that he's on the grid. He'll be joined at the front by James Dodd, and Neil Smith will be at the front as well in his Alfa Romeo 156. John Cleland set the fastest time, but then had to sit out the remainder of the session because of this suspension problem that he had. He said it broke. I think him hitting the curb had something to do with it. Yeah, it was actually a billet aluminium bottom upright piece that his son Jamie brought into David Bartram, who has some excellent fabrication services at Motorbase, and I think they've welded it up for him and got him back out there. You can't go and buy one of those pieces off the shelf. They were all bespoke parts, so they have to be repaired or mended or new ones built. But an absolute dilemma for these guys. They're bathed in sunshine in the assembly area here at the start of the lap, but we know that the track is going to be very damp come Druids Hill Bend. They'd have to start on slicks, but for the front-wheel drive cars particularly, real danger ahead under those trees. And I really hope that, well, they'll see it on their formation lap, but they need to be warned. That part of the track is quite damp. Going to be a rolling start as well, which I know wasn't something that was done in period for these cars, but it's a sensible idea because it reduces the amount of wear on drive shafts and therefore gets away from breakages, because you want as many cars over the weekend. They always have a double header format, incidentally, and so they want as many cars for the second race as possible. So John Cleland will be the man on pole, but those leaden skies don't offer optimism really for what's going to come next. It's going to be John Cleland and James Dodd, who's one of the stars of, hesitate to call these historic cars, but he is in historic racing a real star, no matter what you put him in, a sports racing car, a touring car. And James, who has got two Honda Accords at his disposal, this is the ex-James Thompson car, will be a man to watch as the cars make their way down the pit lane, headed by John Cleland. James Dodd's Honda behind, Neil Smith with his ex-Giovanardi Super Touring Alfa Romeo 156, a car that never ran in the British Championship but did race in the UK when it came in 2001 at the European Touring Car meeting at Silverstone. Graham Dodd there in the ex-Anthony Reid Nissan, James's father. Derek Palmer there in the car that Laurent Aiello used in 1999, one of the two cars he used that year. And behind a Labatt's BMW that used to be raced by that chap Tim Harvey. Yes, that's the 1991 E30 BMW, the very first of the 2-litre cars. There it is. I won the final race in the BTCC in 1991 at Silverstone in that car. And I mean, the progression of super touring cars, when you look at that BMW from 91 all the way through the 90s to the latter year cars that are going to be at the front of this grid, the progression is absolutely staggering. It is. Now there's another ex-Harvey car. It's going down to Cascades. Yeah, being driven by my teammate Patrick Watts. That was the car I raced in 98, 99. Patrick actually bought that car and the sister car that was driven by Paul Radicic. Owns both of them. Patrick never drove that car actually in those colours. He drove the Topol sponsored red and white Peugeot 406 in 1996. But he did race this car down under in New Zealand, and so he does know the car well and is always very quick. But he had a problem in qualifying and will be starting further back on the grid. So his progression through the pack will be interesting to watch. Steve Soper's old BMW in the hands of Mark Smith goes down the pit lane, and at the very back of the grid, just caught a glimpse there, Stuart White, number 1 in the car that Tom Christensen raced in 2000 in the BTCC, in fact, who won the last race of Super Touring in the British Championship era, the night race at Silverstone back in 2000. There's a car that won here as well. That's Tom Christensen had already had one Le Mans victory and was a real star in touring cars, but spent too much time in the BTCC. There is the car. You notice as well they've got 2 numbers on the cars. Some do coincide, but where possible they've kept the period race number in the right font from the time, and then just like the BTCC cars have, there's a little yellow number which is the relevant one for this weekend. John Cleland and James Dodd share row 1. Neil Smith's delectable Alfa Romeo and Graham Dodd's Nissan on row 2. Derek Palmer and Max Goff in the BMW M3 the third row. Simon Garrett is on row 4 with his Renault alongside Keith Butcher. Alvin Powell comes next alongside Patrick Watts. And then clothing boss Dan Wheeler is on the 6th row alongside Dave Jarman, who's one of the 2 prime movers along with Johnny Westbrook of this category. Nick Whale, another period racer, is on row 7 with his old Tech-Speed BMW. Kingsley Ingram's Mazda, a car that didn't race in period, comes next ahead of Mark Jones, and then Mark Wright's recreation of Klaus Ludwig's Zack-Speed Mark II Escort, Darren Fielding's BMW, and Tom Andrews' Alfa Romeo 155, rebuilt after a crash yesterday. Steve Dimmock's Alfa 156 is a Super 2000 car. Rick Wood's Honda is the El Gabriele Tarquini chassis. Tony Absalom drives the old Anthony Reid and then Mint Motorsport Cavalier ahead of Mark Smith, masquerading as Steve Soper. And Stuart White's Honda Accord is at the back of the grid.
Sadly, no Paul Smith in his beautiful Castrol liveried BMW, because it sadly threw a rod out the side of the engine, or the bottom of the engine, in qualifying, and that's the danger with these old cars. And getting them repaired is no easy thing. But he actually showed me the Conrod, and it was the lightest, most beautifully made Pankel Conrod. But of course, they're all aged now. You know, they're quite old, and failures will happen, but not easy to get those things repaired. And you can even see, look at the ride height of that E30 ex-Steve Soper car. Look how high it is. And then you look at the Tom Christensen car from 2000 behind it, how low slung it is. Completely different principle.
The fascination in the grid building over the last couple of years is where all these cars have been found. Many of them have gone off into places like Serbia and the Czech Republic and been used in hill climbs, and they are now being found in random garages and barns in very old places and coming back to the UK. It's this part of the world really where the renaissance is coming, but gradually 1 or 2 more mainland Europe drivers are having a look at Super Touring, and so one hopes the category continues to build. They come to the grid ready for the rolling start. The cars will have a 20-minute race, and it's time rather than a set number of laps. Checkered flag goes out the first time the leader crosses the line once 20 minutes are up. And something I haven't had to say for a long, long time. John Cleland on pole position is
yes,
the story of Oulton Park.
The real John Cleland as well. Not only is it his car, it is him driving. One thing the drivers are going to struggle with is the fact that because they have wet qualifying, they're virtually all on brand new slicks. So they haven't had time to bed those slicks in. They've just had one little warm-up lap. They're going to get one formation lap now and then the rolling start. So the front-wheel drive cars will have to be just a little bit ginger at the start. There would be an advantage for the rear-wheel drive cars in the first few laps.
So in a moment, the cars are going to be released. You can just get a glimpse in that shot of one of the earlier Cavaliers as well. Mark Jones, who's got a Renault Laguna here, one of Jason Plato's cars, has elected not to race that. Could have put Jason in it, couldn't he? But he's gone for the Jeff Allen Cavalier instead, one of the RML cars, and that is a quick car. Mark Jones, in fact, did have a very, very brief spell in the BTCC a few years ago, but these days he's very quick in a Lotus Cortina in pre-66 historic touring car races. So, rolling start, the lap gets underway. Gosh, it takes you back, this, doesn't it, as the cars work their way down towards Old Hall.
It's going to be very hard not to start calling the cars by their period drivers, isn't it?
I'm going to do it, I know it.
Exactly. And that Renault, when I first saw that Renault, the Nescafe Renault Laguna this morning, I hadn't seen that car on track previously, and it just completely took me straight back to the late 90s. I was amazed to see that. We have had 2 races in this championship already, both at Thruxton. First one won by Patrick Watts, and the second one won by John Cleland. So in the championship, Watts leads Cleland.
It's got a nice ring to it, this, hasn't it?
15 points to 30. But Patrick Watts there's got some work to do in this race to get through.
Indeed, so James Dodd was somebody in mechanical woes at Thruxton, and as I was saying earlier, he is a very, very quick driver and always excels around Oulton Park. There's the Gold Cup meeting, which is now for historic cars. A few years ago, I think 3 seasons ago, and no matter what he came out in, he just kept on winning. And his father, Graham Dodd, who was a modified sports car champion in the 1970s, who returned to racing about a decade ago, having built up his business and raised a family. Graham is very quick and versatile as well. Whatever you put him into, he goes well. So both the Dodds are going to be well worth watching. And Neil Smith, Alfa Romeo preparation man with the 156, should be up there as well. As I say, it's not a car that ever did anything in the BTCC. It was really only Alfa 155s that were the cars to watch there. But there is a 155 on the grid. Tom Andrew, local man, in the 155 that had a big off yesterday. Alfa Romeo came to the BTCC in 1994, the year that Gabriele Tarquini won the championship. And straight away, people complained about the rear wings that the cars ran. And it was here that it all came to a head. And Alan Gao said to the team manager, Nini Russo, you can't run with that rear wing. And Nini Russo said, well, if you won't let us run with that wing, we'll go home. And Alan Gao said, right, I'll open the gate for you. And called his bluff, and the Alphas went home. And from that weekend, for a few days, TOCA was referred to as standing for Turf Out Controversial Alphas. But they came back and they won the championship, thanks to Gabriele. And he, of course, stayed in the championship and carried on winning for Honda a few seasons later. But there it is, the 155 in the background, coming into shot. It did not look pretty, that car, yesterday, but they've done a lot of work on it. And it's a car that was raced in the Italian championship by Antonio Tamburini, but it's in British livery.
I seem to remember those cars had a habit of tipping up and rolling over very easily.
There was a famous two-wheeling moment at Donington and a big barrel roll for Gabriele at Knock Hill.
Yes.
Quite right. And I'm sure Tim has spotted this, but Alfa Romeo students will notice that there it is, the 155. Although it's a 1994 car, it's running 95 aero.
I'm sure they will have spotted that, and the fact that you're so knowledgeable about Alfa Romeos in particular will not have gone amiss either. So the grid is forming up. Cleland is leading them through. Rolling start as they come through. On his left is James Dodd. Very, very quick driver indeed. His father, Graham, behind him on the outside of row 2 in the Primera, and being led round very gently by John Cleland. This could be a clever tactic as they go over the wet part of the track, just to sort of spook his rivals out. Maybe John thinks he's quicker on the cold tyres than his less experienced rivals. He may be in for a shock, who knows?
Well, he's not lost any guile over the years, has he, JC? So up they come, out of Deer League, and a snapshot of how touring car racing was in the 1990s is about to get underway. 20 minutes of racing at Oulton Park is go, and John Cleland it is who gets the drop on the opposition, heading down towards Old Hall Corner with up the inside Neil Smith in the Alfa Romeo as he dives up into second place on the inside. Then it's Cleland ahead of Smith, ahead of Dodd, and Max Goff has got a good start. He goes 5th at the BMW.
Very brave by Neil Smith there on lap 1 into Old Hall. He was straight up the inside of James Dodd. Look at Patrick Watts. He's looking for a way through up the inside of Cascades, but Cleland has made the getaway at the start.
James Dodd is up to 2nd though. He's got back ahead through Cascades. Neil Smith drops to 3rd, and then Dodd Senior, Graham Dodd in the Nissan is in 4th. Max Goff 5th, and side by side for 6th. Derek Palmer up alongside Simon Garrett, who will have the inside line in the Renault going into Shell Oil's corner. Has he got the place? Yes, he has. Garrett up the inside, and Patrick Watts tries to buy into this now.
Yeah, Patrick trying to make quick progress towards the front. That Renault Laguna, in fact, that's the car that was driven by Jean-Christophe Bouillon in the British Touring Car Championship.
Race leaders come over hilltop then for the first time, and as they work their way down towards Hislop, look at this, the top 2 gapping everybody else. Neil Smith 3rd, falling away a little bit as he keeps Graham Dodd at bay. Max Goff is under attack though, because Simon Garrett is right with him, and then it's Derek Palmer and Patrick Watts next in the queue.
Well, I think that was actually Max Goff getting past Simon Garrett. He did a real lunge under the brakes. Well, that car did have ABS in its day, and if it's still got it now, then it'll be using it to the maximum.
But John Cleland cannot shake off James Dodd, can he? Look how much wetter Druids is. They tiptoe their way through. Hopefully they tiptoe their way through and nobody comes to grief. That still looks immaculate, that car, doesn't it?
It is. It's very original. And as I said, this part of the track, you know, the rear-wheel drive cars, perhaps with a bit of heat in their slicks, will go very well.
Graham Dodd for 3rd on the inside, then the Nissan. The ex-Anthony Reid car dives through up on the inside line as they work their way to the end of lap number 1 of 20 minutes of racing. I haven't said this for a while. John Cleland leads then as he crosses the line. He's got James Dodd right up behind him, and look at this, what a sight for 3rd place.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to Neil Smith, because remember, Neil Smith was in 2nd, wasn't he? So he dropped down somewhere to 4th. We missed that, and it's very much James Dodd taking the fight to John Cleland at the moment.
Yeah, Smith lost 2nd place here, didn't he, on the first lap, and then Dodd just did him at Lodge Corner, Dodd Senior, so now he's got to go defensive. Of course, all of this is so that other people can admire the Alfa as they come up to pass it, you see. He's trying to get back on the inside of Graham Dodd to no avail of none. Simon Garrett has a go on the inside. That's brave.
Wow, that's very brave on the inside there of Island Bend. You don't want to be, you need some cooperation from the other driver. Max Goff round the outside. Not sure if this will come off, but he'll have good traction off the corner. This is great, respectful driving by these guys.
James Dodd is not yet attacking John Cleland, but he's laying lots of pressure on him. Neil Smith, I'm afraid, is dropping back through the pack here, and he's going to have Derek Palmer for company in a moment. So John Cleland leads the way, but James Dodd, I just get the feeling, might be biding his time here.
Yeah, well, I mean, John is going to have to stay off the curbs here. He's already broken the car once, so you watch, he'll be very careful. But then, obviously, you know, these cars are fragile. Look at the power of that Honda up the hill. Definitely looks to have a bit more engine power, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. And whatever John does, James Dodd won't go away. For third place, though, Simon Garrett is a man on a mission. He was 6th at the start of the lap, and now he's 4th, and he could be 3rd on the next shot because he was teeing up to have a go against Graham Dodd as they worked their way through Druids. He hasn't got past Graham Dodd. These two have raced against each other in all sorts of things over the years. They've shared cars in races, and one year they tied on points and were jointly awarded the HSCC's touring car title. There is the, oh dear, Steve Soper BMW. Let's come to that. Mark Smith. It was smoky in qualifying. It's smoky again, and if he's dropping oil down, that's going to go down like a rattlesnake.
Yeah, well, you know, when you see blue smoke from the back of your car, whoa, down the inside, is that going to come off? I think it will. Oh, and Cleland having to defend as well into Cascade. It's great action. This is so reminiscent, isn't it, of the period. Great racing. James Dodd, I think he had didn't he have a drive shaft failure at Thruxton in one of the races that cost him a win? That's been repaired, but yes, he's biding his time as well. But so reminiscent of the period, this racing.
Dave Jarman there in the ex-Matt Neal car, making his way down to Island Bend as Cleland and James Dodd filling his mirrors, continue to squabble. That, I'm afraid, is the demise of Mark Smith, again in one of the early BMW M3s, the ex-Steve Soper car being pushed out of harm's way. Now, Simon Garrett did the fastest lap of the race last time. There he is in the Renault, ahead of Max Goff, who in turn has now got charging Derek Palmer Jr. behind him. Slippery surface flag now at his lock. John Cleland arrives on scene first, with James Dodd absolutely glued to his tail, and they tiptoed their way through a very slippery part of the circuit.
You could see the cars twitching around, and they were going very slowly there. So clearly a substantial amount of oil went down, and I think that the ex-Soper car did pull off there, so hopefully the rest of the track will be clear.
I think you're right about that. This is Druids, and look at what's going on for third, because not only is Graham Dodd now being caught by Simon Garrett, but they're lapping a little bit quicker than the leaders, so the gap's coming down. James Dodd may have his dad for company before much longer, so John Cleland leads the way, but he just can't escape at the moment.
No, I think you're right. I think Dad Dodd, if you like, Graham Dodd is actually running quicker at the moment. Look, Graham Dodd is catching James Dodd and John Cleland.
You know what John will say? Oh, I just wanted to make a race of it all. But yes, at the moment, he can't get away from James, can he, as he comes into Old Hall corner?
Trust me, the one thing I know about John Cleland is he will definitely have an answer.
Oh, yes. He has lost none of his verbosity over the years, but he's still a very, very good competitor, John. Double BTCC champion, of course, and twitches his way out of Cascades with James Dodd and then Graham Dodd third. Now, the other man to watch, about to come into shot there, Derek Palmer, has done the fastest lap of the race. That's one of the two cars that Laurent Aiello drove in 1999. In fact, that ended its season up against the pit wall at Donington. That is a car that never raced in period, the Mazda 323 that was built for Slim Borgood, the former F1 racer and ABBA drummer. Kingsley Ingram has it, and he's attacking Nick Whale in the car that he raced in period, and they almost get themselves together at Cascades. Yeah,
Nick's absolutely loving driving that car, but he's made the mistake of letting his son Harry drive it, and Harry loves it even more. I know what tends to happen here, that Harry will end up taking over the car.
Yes.
That's actually fitted with a 2.5 litre engine now, that car. Would have raced in period with a 2-litre engine. Right.
Built as a Group A car, and he's lost the pace. And now look at this for the race lead. It is 3. Simon Garrett has not stayed with Graham Dodd, but John Cleland is under huge attack from the family now. James Dodd comes up to challenge, heading up Clay Hill. Can he get alongside and challenge going into Druids?
Well, this is brave. They're coming up to the damp part of the track, and James will be on that damp part. You can see it there. He's going to have wet tyres now. Turning into Druids, Cleland tucks into line. Very brave, very good driving by James. I think he saw Dad coming with the big stick, and he had to get a move on.
And Graham fancies his chances of getting past John Cleland as well. Wouldn't it be fascinating to see James Dodd in the modern BTCC? For now, though, Cleland is keeping Dodd Senior at bay, and James Dodd, I think, is going to escape here.
Yeah, but you were right about Palmer. His fastest lap was actually 3 seconds quicker, but immediately James Dodd strikes back. He got the fastest lap, only for Dan to take it off him again. So Graham Dodd is still the quickest guy on the track.
Well, there's the leader, James Dodd, up front then. John Cleland is second, just ahead of Graham Dodd. Simon Garrett fourth in the Renault. Derek Palmer fifth, and Max Goff doing a really good job in the BMW in sixth spot. Neil Smith is down to seventh in the Alfa Romeo 156 now, ahead of Keith Butcher's Nissan, Alvin Powell's Mondeo, the ex-Anthony Reid car, and then Dave Jarman's Matt Neal Nissan rounds out the top 10. From the back of the grid, Stuart White is 11th in the ex-Tom Christensen Honda. But now James Dodd in the ex-James Thompson car getting away, as there Steve Dimmock in the Super 2000 156 has a go on the inside of Darren Fielding, coming down to Lodge Corner. Much later Alfa Romeo up the inside, and behind is the ex-Jamie Wall, Anthony Reid, Mint Motorsport Cavalier. Came out of the Japanese Championship and came to the BTCC after that.
Yeah, a man who hasn't made progress we expected was Patrick Watts, and he's still down in 12th place and not lapping particularly quickly. So Patrick hasn't made the progress we expected. I'm sure, like John Cleland, he'll have plenty of reasons for that as well. But just loving driving the car and tinkering with it, and you know, just enjoying their hobby.
Steve Dimmock to the inside of Rick Wood, who's a bit of an Oulton Park expert. Rick Wood, he's an engine builder and has raced a great variety of cars around here. And Patrick Watts is on the grass, coming through his lots. I think Stuart White may well have muscled away past him, yes he has. And Patrick runs out of road.
Well, Patrick Watts is on the grass is a quote directly from Period.
I was just teeing it up for you to say that, yes. Plus ça change. So Patrick Watts has a little moment. Now Dave Jarman's coming under attack, isn't he? Still Druids is so wet, in complete contrast to the rest of the lap. At the head of this gaggle, Alvin Powell's Mondeo, or one of his many Mondeos in fairness, the ex-Anthony Reid car. And Stuart White tries to get past Dave Jarman there, coming down towards Lodge Corner, and Patrick Watts buys back into it and gets ahead of the Honda. That was good opportunistic stuff.
That was very good. He has lost none of his racecraft, Patrick, and he knew the track was drier there on the inside and he'd get better grip and better traction coming off it.
So John Cleland in second place, falling away now from James Dodd, but keeping Dad Dodd at bay. So Graham is there in third spot. Dave Jarman tries to get back ahead of Patrick Watts, who's just slipped up past him, but can't do so, and now he's got to try and keep Stuart White at bay. Oh, and Alvin Powell there, leaning on Keith Butcher. That puts now the Mondeo ahead of the Nissan. It's a little bit more physical, this, than I anticipated it to be.
Well, yeah, actually, I took part in one of the races here last year. I took part in the Gold Cup meeting on the Monday after Knock Hill and drove my old RS 500, and there was a lot of talk then about driving standards, but I think the driving standards have been excellent. Dan
Wheeler, I'm afraid, who's never raced here before, has come into the pit lane in his ex-Anthony Reid Nissan, a 97 car that he has never raced before, and by the look of it, he might have had an off somewhere, so let's hope that car's going to be good for the race tomorrow. Dan currently is the man to beat in Mini Amelia racing, also very quick in historic minis, but now turning his attention to super touring cars as the leaders work their way down towards Lodge. Now let's have a look at what was going on over at Britain's. Patrick Watts is in the thick of this by the look of it, and locking up is Keith Butcher, who finds the water splash and hopefully avoids everybody. But one or two have to take evasive action there.
Yeah, but definitely filled up the radiators with mud and grass, so he'll need to clear those out, or he'll have a very expensive overheated engine under the bonnet. But good driving by Alvin Powell. He loves these Mondeos, and he's driving very well.
As he has a number of the later cars, he's also got the 93 Saloon Mondeo that Paul Radicic won the Monza Touring Car World Cup in from that year. As Tony Absalom's Cavalier goes through his lops ahead of Darren Fielding. There is Alvin Powell, still coming under attack. He's running in 8th place, and he's way wide at Old Hall Corner, and that's done the rear valance no good.
Yes, that's definitely exceeding track limits, and Patrick Watts was next around the corner to try and take advantage. Still love seeing that ex-McNeil car. I was working as sort of driver liaison for Matt when he won that famous 250,000. Here's a replay of Alvin getting this corner wrong again. Old Hall comes in, carries too much speed, gets out wide, very stiffly sprung these cars, and as he bounces over the rough grass, it just pulls the rear bumper off. But yeah, Matt Neal's old car, driven by Dave Jarman, just looks absolutely fantastic. I keep thinking it should have the yellow Velcro piece on the side, for which used to be pulled off at the pit stop, the compulsory pit stop.
John Cleland out of Druids in second place. Now, he's certainly shaken off Graham Dodd all of a sudden, hasn't he? The gap was 9 tenths. I think Graham may have had a drama on this lap because he's fallen away, and he's almost in the clutches now of Simon Garrett, who in turn is being reeled in by Derek Palmer, whose number 23 is a real 23, coming out of Lodge. Of course, all the Works Nissans ran 23 as their number in period. Over the timing line, James Dodd, fastest lap of the race. He's 3 seconds clear of John Cleland. Graham Dodd third, Simon Garrett fourth, Derek Palmer is fifth. Graham Dodd still pressing on. The gap to Simon Garrett is 9 tenths of a second now. Down towards Lodge Corner comes Alvin Powell's now rather battle-scarred Mondeo. It has Alain Menu's name on the window. It's not a Menu car, but Alain came to have a look at it yesterday, and Alvin Powell was more than happy to let Alain sit in it, and photographs were taken, and it was one for the scrapbook. Over the timing line comes Alvin Powell, the Welshman keeping at bay Dave Jarman, who, along with Johnny Westbrook, has done so much to make this category the success it is now and get cars on track. And these two squabbling 10th and 11th with only 6 more minutes of the race to go.
Yeah, there's a similar story with Steve Dimmock's Alfa Romeo, because he had Fabrizio Giovanardi come and have a look at it yesterday, and he wasn't sure whether it was Giovanardi's car or not, but Giovanardi took one look at the pedal box and said, yes, that's my car, because I had a different pedal box in the car, because I right foot braked and all the other drivers left foot braked, so he was able to confirm it to a very happy Steve Dimmock.
You probably found the value went up at 2,000 at the time, yes. Now, the Dodd-Garrett battle is building up nicely. This is Graham Dodd in the Nissan, just ahead of Jean-Christophe Bouillon, masquerading as Simon Garrett, and then Derek Palmer is in 5th place as they head up towards Druids. Every shot you get takes you back, but this is fantastic, isn't it, to see Nissan and the Renault getting themselves together. And they're driven properly as well, driven hard, these cars. Down to Lodge Corner, 5 more minutes remain. And while James Dodd is pulling away up front to give the championship a third different winner in 3 races, potentially, Graham Dodd is under attack. Simon Garrett in that Renault has really got onto his tail.
Yes, where did Simon... He's got 2 of these Renaults. I'm not sure where he found them, actually. Do you know where he found them?
This one came from, I think he told me, Montenegro.
Right. That's the obvious place where you'd find an ex-BTCC Renault Laguna.
Most of them are coming Montenegro or Belgrade. Belgrade, his car was found. Yes, there was another one from Montenegro. And he's going to get a big moment there.
Yeah,
done it.
And also Graham will have dirt on his tyres. That will slow down a little bit, or at least make him question his entry speed here into the island bend.
So Derek Palmer may well be able to attack now. Derek Palmer in the second of those Nissans, with the windscreen strip celebrating Laurent Aiello's championship success. Meantime, James Dodd pulling away from John Cleland, works his way through Britons. Simon Garrett now in 3rd spot. Now, what can he do about Cleland? He's too far back, I think, before the end of the race. But Derek Palmer for 4th is a real possibility. Down they come, almost side by side, the Nissans. Derek Palmer had a look, but then thought better of it.
Meanwhile, Stuart White, number 1 in his Honda, who was fighting his way back up the order, if you remember, from back of the grid, has got himself all the way up to 8th place. That's car number 1, and he's set the fastest lap of the race, quicker even than James Dodd.
Meantime, Rick Wood keeps Tony Absalom at bay, coming out of Lodge Corner, heading up towards Deer Leap. And over the timing line they go, with just under 3.5 minutes of the race remaining now, working their way through Old Hall. And Stuart White pressing on, he's closing on Max Goff, and in fact, as the race has worn on, so Neil Smith has got himself back up the order into the top 6 again in the 156. Alvin Powell ahead of Dave Jarman here, and then the recovering Keith Butcher, after his rally crossing moment at Britons, heads up towards Druids. This little battle still 10th, 11th and 12th as the cars work their way up towards the right-hander, and Graham Dodd loses it coming out of Old Hall. Back in the right direction, finds a gear, carries on, but of course he's lost a place now to Derek Palmer.
Yeah, that's a shame. He was having a great race, Graham was, from the early laps where he was pushing his son. He's got grass in the splitter. Here we are. He was under attack. Is there contact? No, I think Graham just gets out onto the outside of the track with a little bit less grip on it and spins around. Fortunately, without contact with any other cars or the barrier. I'm amazed that bumper's still on the back.
But again, you see, that takes you back because you used to see cars with rear damage like that, dragging the remains round to the checkered flag. Peter Riches, who is still the technical manager of the championship, used to be on his toes with a black and orange flag if needs be, but for the moment it is Alvin Powell hanging onto the place and the rear valance just about hanging onto the back of the car. Rick Wood in the meantime fending off former Volkswagen racer Tony Absalom. Darren Fielding is next, and they're in danger of being lapped, aren't they now, because James Dodd, with now less than a lap time left in the race, so he'll start his last lap this time, comes down towards Lodge Corner. I did say before the race started that he's a bit of a star in historics, and he's rather proved the point. This has been a very impressive drive. A very impressive drive. I mean, James was winning last year in the Nissan Primera that his father's driving, but then when they got the Honda, youth overtook old age, and James acquired the driver's seat to it. And they've got another of these Hondas. They've got a Peter Cox car as well, but it's the Tomo car that's been pressed into service this weekend to very good effect. One of the Fostech built cars. Up the inside he goes to put a lap on Tony Absalom in the Mint Motorsport Cavalier that Anthony Reid raced in Japan, and then it came into racing in this country. Richard Kay and Jamie Wall drove it. Yeah, there are lots of different Hondas. They were all built by different people. You've got the ProDrive built cars, you've got the Yaz Motorsport built cars, N Technology. There's all sorts of different cars built by different people. They look similar, but very different. So on this, the last lap of the race, James Dodd working his way up towards Britain's. John Cleland still threading his way through traffic as well. And the first of the 888 built Vectras, and then Simon Garrett is going to be good for the podium as the Alfa Romeo 155 with its red sticky tape to repair yesterday's damage. Garrett, one of the earlier cars of the Super Touring era, works its way up towards Knickerbrook, and Tom Andrew, former Morgan GT racer, is about to be lapped by James Dodd. With a significant amount more power, it must be said. I mean, the latter year Super Touring cars probably had 30 horsepower more than the early cars. So Druids for the final time. A mighty impressive effort this has been by James Dodd. He works his way down towards Lodge Corner. And I think it's fair to say these cars have been a hit this afternoon. It's been a good race. It's been great fun. The crowd, you know, everyone watching this race, watching the cars, bringing back memories, and great to have them on the support bill for the BTCC meeting. James Dodd takes victory at Oulton Park. Yet another winner's trophy at Oulton for him, this time in a Super Touring Honda Accord. John Cleland comes home second, and for third it is going to be Simon Garrett in the Renault. For fourth place, Derek Palmer will come across the line, and Graham Dodd, after his spin, falls to fifth. But Stuart White got himself into the top six on that penultimate lap. Can he stay there? He should be able to. Patrick Watts up to seventh as Neil Smith fell down the order a little bit. There are still battles to be resolved. Alvin Powell is trying to keep at bay Keith Butcher, despite the rear valance hanging on by a thread. I always remember the team managers will be rushing up to the clerk saying, no, it won't fall off, no need to black flag it, it'll be fine, no worries, it's got safeties on it, don't worry. Nothing changes either. Out of Dearly comes Alvin Powell. Blue sticky tape at the ready to get the car back as new for tomorrow. Over the line he comes in the end. Dave Jarman got ahead of him, and Alvin Powell fell away a little bit. So Patrick Watts was 7th behind Stuart White. Neil Smith 8th. Max Goff 9th. Dave Jarman 10th. Alvin Powell here 11th. And Keith Butcher behind him 12th. And that's the reception from the marshals and the medical team trackside, many of whom will remember these cars first time around. And great fun it has been. A good race, but some proper driving. And James Dodd underlining why he is so much talked about in... I still find it wrong to call these historic cars, but you know what I mean. Earlier generation race cars, shall we call them that? But some of them, 20 years old. Time has gone very quickly. So James Dodd, a race winner, and admits that his first introduction to Super Touring was playing the Toka game on his PlayStation. And he used to enjoy that, so the chance to race one of these cars is excellent. And apparently he used to choose the Renault Laguna, not a Honda. But now they've got one, or two, he thinks this is the car he should drive. Each car you see brings back more memories, doesn't it?
It does, and obviously for me, having raced throughout that period, you know, massive memories of a very good time of racing. Great, recreated excellently here, and here's the result.
James Dodd wins the first of 2 Historic Sports Car Club Super Touring races of the weekend from John Cleland and Simon Garrett. Derek Palmer comes home 4th ahead of Graham Dodd, and then Stuart White 6th from the back of the grid. Patrick Watt 7th ahead of Neil Smith, Max Goff and David Jarman to round out the top 10. 11th, Alvin Powell, now rather dog-eared Mondeo ahead of Keith Butcher. Mark Wright's recreation of Klaus Ludwig's Escort, the Zach Speed car 13th. Kingsley Ingram 14th in the Mazda, going nicely ahead of Nick Whale and Steve Dimmock. Rick Wood 17th ahead of Tom Andrew, Darren Fielding and Tony Absalom's Cavalier 20th. Dan Wheeler we saw in the pits, Mark Jones in his Cavalier, not the Renault today, and Mark Smith's BMW again in problems.